Thank you, everyone who's joining us live. As I'm starting to talk, I realize there's an incredible echo in this room, and it's probably going to carry throughout the lesson tonight. So I apologize for that. Let me see really quickly if I open a window, if that'll help stop the sound. But I'm also realizing that I have a neighbor who's mowing. So please let me know in the comments what the sound quality is like. I'll see what I can do if I have to do something to try to fix it. But I don't know if there's going to be a lot I can do about it. As in order to fix the sound problems, I need to actually get fully moved into this house and put furniture in this room so that you don't have that heavy bass echo that I'm hearing, that I assume is also probably being picked up by the microphone. So if somebody who's listening could give me some comments, let me know how it sounds. Okay, Stefania says it's all right. I'm just going to have to push through it myself because this room is the kind of room right now that the acoustics would make you want to sing, but it's probably not good for much anything beyond singing at this point. As you can see by the background, it's a pretty plain room right now because we have just moved in. I just put stuff in my office yesterday for the very first time. I'm borrowing a desk that Lori has so I can have a computer desk. I worked late last night getting the internet going so I could have internet to do this. And I'm missing my notes that I'm supposed to have for this lesson. So I had to rush really fast to get a new set of notes written up. So bear with me if my thoughts are a little bit out of order and disjointed. So I don't think I can give a tour, as Stefania's asking, because my computer's the desktop. So I don't think it's going to work too good for me to pick it up and try to carry it around the house. So, but this is my office, this room where I'll be at for now. I'll have to find better ways to make it look better for videos and things like that and get it set a little better, but that'll take time. As this room's low priority, just like my office at the church is low priority. But it'll get done before the one at the church will. So, all right. Let me get the last little bit of my stuff done. I just didn't want to keep the video waiting as I was trying to get one more thing written down for my notes tonight. As I said, I had to recreate those, and I didn't have those with me. So there's one verse in particular that I was wanting to write down. That's okay. We'll go ahead and get started. I give my greetings to everyone. I see we have some friends joining who aren't necessarily normally part of these studies. I'm glad to see you're a part of this as well. So I give my greetings to everybody. I'm talking lower because if I talk too loud, I do think the bass would pick up that echo back of the bass from being in a smaller room with nothing in it to cancel that. So if you're having problems hearing me or anything like that, please let me know that as well. Give me just a second to search for the verse that I'm looking for. Okay, I found it. All right, thank you, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started into the study tonight then. Again, I apologize with any issues with sound, the fact that it's very plain background, lighting's very harsh, all of that, because this has not been set up or prepared in any way. We've got other stuff working on, still trying to get moved in the house and trying to get the other house ready as we're moving out of it. I don't think you'll hear the lawnmower from my neighbor. It's pretty far away, but it's something I can hear. I don't think you'll hear the kids because this house is actually pretty well made to where even though I'm a level closer to them, they're not any louder than they were at the old house. So all of it's looking good so far. Let's go ahead and not waste any more time though, and go ahead and get right into the study of what is wisdom. Tonight we want to talk about the heart. Most people, when you think of anything to do with intelligence, you're automatically going to think of the mind. Everything about intelligence, we think that comes from the mind. But in reality, a lot of what we get the idea of IQ, of that kind of intelligence, that capacity to learn and so forth, that's really more a matter of the heart a lot of what we associate with wisdom in those terms. That a natural ability somebody has to be intelligent. Those are more matters of the heart. Now, of course, I hope you understand when I talk about the heart, I'm not talking about the organ in your chest that pumps blood. I'm talking about your soul, that part of you that is not organic. It's not a material thing. It is that thoughts, desire, emotions, all those things of who you are. Of course, I hope by this point anybody watching will understand that as a human being, you're made up of three parts: a body, soul, and a spirit. Your body being that physical part of you, your soul or the heart being the part of you that is your thoughts, desires, feelings, all that kind of stuff. And the spirit, that little harder to define part of you, but it's really the part of you that's like that central programming of who you are, that really is like the operating system that determines everything about who you are as a person. So saying that, the thing about wisdom we have to understand going into a study like this is that wisdom is not really a matter of the mind, and this is biblical. It's not, an opinion. It's not something I'm just throwing out there at you. That's actually the whole point of the study tonight, is to show you that the Bible says wisdom is from the heart. The understanding is from the heart. Now, knowledge, we know according to the Bible, is not from the heart directly, but your capacity to increase in knowledge is influenced by what kind of heart you have. So with that in mind, I'm going to throw up the wisdom chart, and I'm going to have to try to figure out how to keep myself from being covered up by it. There we go. So we'll notice that when looking at the wisdom chart, that your heart has one of two positions in which it's being shown here. One is that it's a heart that is ruled by unbelief, and the other is it's a heart that's ruled by the fear of the Lord. I'll discuss those things more in the next week, and I'll discuss why those things have a hold over your heart. Because again, most people wouldn't associate unbelief with intelligence, and they wouldn't associate the fear of the Lord with intelligence. We tend to disassociate faith and intelligence as if they have nothing to do with one another. But in reality, they are very closely connected according to the Bible. So as we look at this chart and the idea here, we understand the basic principles. At least we did a study on the basic principles. I hope you understand them, of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, scornfulness, foolishness, simplicity, and then those things that branch out from that. So without having to spend a lot of time looking at the chart itself, the main thing tonight we're going to look at is that when your heart, which is the heart of the matter, is touched by the fear of the Lord, it pushes someone towards wisdom and understanding. It produces wisdom and understanding is probably the better way to say that. Whereas when somebody's heart is touched by unbelief, it produces foolishness and scornfulness. And that's pretty easy for me to show you in the Bible. The reason for that being that the Bible actually outright says some of that. In fact, the verse I was looking for to make sure I had it for tonight is Proverbs 14:1. There's actually not Proverbs, Psalms 14:1. It's actually another verse in the book of Psalms as well that says the exact same thing, that the fool has said in his heart that there is no God. That's one of the most important verses to me for understanding foolishness and how it relates to this. Is that for the fool, the issue in his heart does really stem from this thing of unbelief, that in his heart he has said there is no God. And so because of that, that unbelief has pierced into his heart and it's made him deny God. And because we said wisdom in a lot of ways functions as a worldview, a way in which you look at the world around you, it does affect your view, or in the case of foolishness, your ability to properly view the world around you. Because we'll see there's more than one type of wisdom when we get to that side of things and look at that a little more. And that's the one where it really gets complicated. The main verse in Proverbs, which I'll get to later, concerning foolishness, and it's part of this, is Proverbs 17:16, where it says the fool has no capacity for wisdom in his heart. With that, though, I actually want to start with my text verse being Proverbs 4:23 and Proverbs 16:9. These are not necessarily verses you would immediately associate with wisdom, but they are verses that are completely about the heart and help us understand the heart's relationship to all of these things. So Proverbs 4:23 is one that you hear me quote often. I think most people will know. It says, "Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life." So the heart of who you are, the soul, the desire, the emotions, all of that. God gives us a warning in this passage here, one of the more prominent verses in the book of Proverbs, telling you to keep it with all diligence. To give every ability you have to keep and protect your heart, because out of your heart are the issues of life. Meaning that everything about who you are, everything about what you'll do, everything that proceeds forth in your decision making and all of this comes forth from your heart. And once you understand that, where wisdom proceeds forth from the heart actually becomes a natural thing to understand. If everything about who I am and everything about my capacity to make decisions and how I view things proceeds forth from my heart, then of course wisdom would also come from my heart. Since wisdom is my viewing of the world, it is my judgment, it is my sense of justice, it is all of those things that we're talking about proceeding forth from the heart. Wisdom is that. And so, of course, when you see it that way, it starts to make sense that wisdom is an issue of the heart. Now, I understand still at this point for many people, just to even hear that is going to be a strange thing, because our concept of wisdom is that it's all here. But in reality, God puts it here. So that's something I want to explore and show you throughout the book of Proverbs, especially. In fact, all of our verses, other than the one from Psalms, will come from Proverbs tonight. But the other one I said I would use as a text verse would be Proverbs 16:9. Proverbs 16 and verse 9 says, "A man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directeth his steps." Now, the actual point of that verse is that you come up with your plans and your ideas and your desires and all this stuff, and you set this aside in your heart that this is what I'm going to do. But in reality, God's the one who makes the final decision. If God doesn't allow your plans to come to pass, they're not going to come to pass. If God doesn't, allow these things to happen, they're not going to happen. So the reality of what that verse is saying is that, you may come up with your schemes and dreams, but God's the one who has the final say in it. But there's something important stated in that verse, wherein he tells us that it's the heart that deviseth these things. It's the heart that's coming up with these ideas. It's the heart that's thinking about. You can think about, the Bible uses the word pondereth in his heart, or pondereth in her heart. In fact, Mary, when she's told the news that she's going to conceive and bring forth Jesus, it says she took these things and she pondered them in her heart. That means with her heart, she thought over these things. With her heart, she considered these things. With her heart, she judged and went through these things. So you see the exercising of wisdom according to the use of the word pondering, which is always, or not always, but very commonly used in relation to the heart, shows you that the heart is the place from which wisdom is produced. It is the place from which wisdom is exercised. And so knowing that and seeing that, those are the foundational principles that we're going to try to build on tonight. This idea that your heart really does matter when it comes to this, and whether it's touched by unbelief or the fear of the Lord is the key to all of this. Because someone who sits down and listens to what I'm saying tonight and they have no regard for God, they're not going to regard what I have to say either. When somebody sits down and listens to me give the gospel and I walk them down the Romans road, when I talk to them about creation versus evolution, to them it's nonsense and it's silliness and it makes no sense, no matter how much logic, no matter how much wisdom, no matter how much I present facts and all these things and show them, and they just have to sit there and agree, yes, that's right. At the end of the day, it still comes across as foolishness to them, because their entire view of everything proceeds forth from a heart that does not believe there's a God. And so their entire view of reality requires that there is no God, and therefore anything that requires the belief in God is foolishness to them. And then you flip that over to the biblical view that's being presented here. Anything that proceeds forth from a heart of unbelief, anything wherein I'm trying to explain the universe through a big bang and through all this stuff that requires me to jump through all these hoops of how we could get here without God, or anything that requires me to process information or, explain, well, if there wasn't a God, it would be like this. Anytime you ask me to answer a question like that, Because, as Christians, many times we're challenged to answer questions. Well, if God didn't exist, then, answer it this way, or, to look at it like this. And in reality, as a Christian, that's foolishness. And that's why Paul, even as we were studying in 2 Corinthians, refers to it as speaking as a fool when he's going to come and talk to them on a human level instead of on a spiritual level, on a fleshly level instead of a spiritual level. Because there are these two sides of it, and they very much do come from where your heart is. Is my heart one that the entire foundation and reality of what I believe about the world around me is shaped by my belief in God? Or is the entire reality of what I believe about the world around me shaped by my unbelief? Is it shaped by me not believing that there's a God? Those two things will always be the core foundation that determines everything. And then proceeding forth from that comes to the heart, and the heart is where everything proceeds out of. So Jesus illustrated this when he said, it's not what a man eats that defiles him, but what comes forth out of his mouth, because that proceeds forth from the heart. He said it this way, that it's out of the abundance of the heart that the mouth speaketh, meaning that what we say is the fruit being produced from our heart. Our actions are fruits being produced from our heart. Our decisions are evidence of our heart. These kind of things are all evidence of our heart and the decision making that's going on there. So even without me really having showed you, because I've not showed you any verses yet to prove my point, I think most people watching this who are Christians and who have some degree of understanding biblically are already realizing, okay, actually, yeah, my decision making and my capacity to process information and know how to use the knowledge that I have, how I use that knowledge, of course, that would come from my heart, because I make my decisions with my heart. I make my decisions from here. And so at that point, even speaking in terms of making spiritual decisions, the act of the decision is here. Even though you're relying on the Holy Spirit to guide you, your decision to do that is made here. That doesn't mean it's an emotional decision, not to get sidetracked, because that's a whole other issue. So a few verses I want to run through real quick. This doesn't have to be a long study. I'm not trying to make it one, although it could be, because we could do like we did in the introduction to wisdom and spend a long time talking about some of this stuff. But let me jump to Proverbs 2 and verse 2. Or I'll start in verse 1. It says, "My son, if thou wilt receive my words and hide my commandments with thee, so that thou incline thine heart unto wisdom and apply thine heart to understanding." So this is getting ready to talk about the value of wisdom and how precious wisdom is and how much we need it. But he's starting by making this simple statement. He's telling him to incline his ear. That means to submit yourself to listen to wisdom, but it says apply thine heart to understanding. That's giving your heart and applying it, that, okay, my heart's going to be focused or dedicated to understand. So you see at this point, understanding, according to that verse, is going to be a muscle that's exercised within the heart. Verse 10, if you jump down to that, says, "When wisdom entereth into thine heart, and knowledge is pleasant to thy soul, discretion shall preserve thee, and understanding shall keep thee." So here's where you see that wisdom is not just a matter of what you hear, but it's also something that enters into the heart and rests in the heart. In fact, Proverbs 4, I'm going to get out of my notes completely out of order to jump to the point I want to say here. Proverbs 14:33 says, "Wisdom resteth in the heart of him that hath understanding, but that which is in the midst of fools is made known." So wisdom, according to that, resteth in the heart. Understanding resteth in the heart. He says someone who understands, wisdom will rest in his heart. Now, understand that wisdom and understanding go hand in hand together. They're most always going to be connected and talked about. It is impossible to have one growing in the heart without the other growing in some capacity along with it. They go hand in hand together. Same thing with scornfulness and foolishness. The two things, if you study them throughout the Bible, you look at it even logically, the two are going to grow together because one produces the other. It's natural that one builds into the other that way. So that's where you see that connection there of Proverbs 14:33, that wisdom resteth in the heart of him that hath understanding. Proverbs 10:8 says, the wise in heart will receive commandments, but a prating fool shall fall. So this is the idea that when we do have wisdom in our heart, or when we have a wise heart, that we will receive commandments. And this comes down to the fact that the Bible, as we study about wisdom more, you'll see that it's repeatedly one of the major themes of wisdom is that wisdom listens, wisdom learns, wisdom is watching the world around it and taking that information and processing it and applying it and learning what that means. Is someone who, when you give them data or statistics, they can then take that and break it down and figure out what that means to them and how they can apply it. As someone who can watch somebody else try something and fail and then realize, okay, I have to try something else. All of those kind of things are wisdom being exercised. And so it's someone who's taking that information that's being presented and making decisions based off of that. So here you see that being presented, that when someone has a wise heart, when they're wise in heart, they will receive commandments. They will listen to what's being taught them, and they will take it and grow from it. You also see further indication here of something that we've already presented, and that's that wisdom and foolishness are going to be opposites. You see the contrast that the wise in heart will receive commandments, but a prating fool shall fall. Then I say Proverbs 15:14. The heart of him that hath understanding seeketh knowledge, but the mouth of fools feedeth on foolishness. So the idea here is that the heart of him that hath understanding. So someone who has understanding, then something that we've seen already is in the heart. Understanding is the issue there. So that heart that has understanding in it is a heart that seeks after knowledge. So here's where I say that knowledge is going to be more of an issue of the mind, something we'll talk about another day. We'll get through some of these lessons about the heart and unbelief and so forth first. But as we look at this idea, that where that pertains is that when someone has understanding in their heart, or they have a heart that is understanding, maybe is the better way to say it, that person will try to know what's going on. They'll try to understand it, and by understanding it, they will have that knowledge. As you understand something, you have the information that comes with that. You know, if you are somebody who computers are still witchcraft to you, then that lack of understanding you have about computers makes it so you don't really know why it does what it does. You don't know what this button does. You don't know how to fix this problem. You don't know a lot about them. That's why it still feels like witchcraft. So you see there's a balance in that, that when you know something or not, when you understand something or not, it affects your opinion of it and your comfort with it and so forth. So those two things go closely together. But that verse is, again, also being given tonight, not to build any bigger points, but just to illustrate that the understanding is a heart issue, and it's a heart that understands. And then Proverbs 16:21 through 23. Proverbs 16:21 says, the wise in heart shall be called prudent, and the sweetness of the lips increaseth learning. Understanding is a wellspring of life to him that hath it, but the instruction of fools is folly. The heart of the wise teacheth his mouth, and addeth learning to his lips. So this is just to say that, that last verse is to say that a wise heart will, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. That wisdom will be seen in the way that someone speaks. It will influence and affect and direct the way that someone speaks, having that wisdom there inside of their heart. So it's, again, that natural relationship that as the heart overflows and the words come out the mouth, that it will show that. But you see also that it says the wise in heart shall be called prudent. Prudent is somebody who can see down the road and already understand where the decisions that they're making, where that's going to lead them, where it's going to take them to go certain ways. And you see even the instruction of fools. That's when you're trying to teach someone who's a fool. It's folly. It's something, just for simplicity of what I'm trying to say tonight, is something that's going to fail. And so you're seeing throughout these different things that's being said across these three verses, this understanding again that knowledge is closely associated, but not necessarily of the heart. Wisdom and understanding are directly from the heart. Foolishness is directly from the heart. And these are things that scornfulness also, which we haven't said much anything about scornfulness tonight, but we understand that pride comes forth from the heart, and scornfulness comes from pride. So, of course, that's going to be a hard issue as well. But your understanding throughout these things, or at least I hope you are, unless I'm doing a really bad job presenting it, is that your ability to take the information that's given to you and to either understand it or to apply it and use it in your life comes from your heart. It is an issue of your heart, and therefore, because it's an issue of the heart and not simply an issue of the mind, it's going to be first and foremost affected by your belief or unbelief. It's going to be affected by whether you really fear God and regard Him. And that's why it's not at the center of our chart. It's not belief and unbelief. It's fear of the Lord and unbelief. It's because of this. There are steps to things. There are layers to things. Unbelief is going to send you plummeting straight into foolishness. The fool has said in his heart, there is no God, and that has shaped him. That is his guiding principle that shapes him through every part of his life. Every fiber of his being is determined by this principle, that in his heart he has said there is no God, and nobody and nothing is going to change him on that. You can take a step away from that and still step away from foolishness, but still miss the mark. And that's when you have someone who's wise enough to acknowledge and understand that maybe there's a God, but they don't fully regard Him. They're not being completely driven by this desire to deny and reject God to the point to where even the way that they try to apply the information being given to them is just foolishness. And we all know that. We see that. There's certain scientists coming to my mind who speaks brilliantly. He's very knowledgeable. He's educated. And that's knowledge. That's all matters of the mind. But when it comes to his heart, his ability to take that knowledge that he has received and then apply it and use it, or to understand the world around him with it, he completely lacks that ability. I've listened to him give debates. I've listened to him speak many, many times. And I'm being respectful right now and not bringing him up but by name. But this particular scientist is one of the most famous for one reason. He hates God. He has paid and financed campaigns all around England just to tell people there's no God. Go live your life the way you want to. And you see his entire reality is shaped by the hatred and denial of God, to the point to where even though he's incredibly intelligent in terms of knowledge, his ability to take that knowledge and use it, when you listen to him debate somebody, you can see that this man really, like, I've heard him make the argument. In fact, I've been beating around it, but let me just go say it's Richard Dawkins who I'm talking about, which normally when I'm saying something about a scientist, he's probably the one I'm talking about. You can just assume that. But I've heard him in debate say that nobody has ever been driven to kill people in the name of atheism or evolution. And I sat back and scratched my head, because his insistence is that the majority of people being killed throughout history were done so in the name of religion. And the truth is, the only war that you really can argue was fought in the name of religion would be the Crusades, and that was actually more of a land war. And the fact is, true biblical Christianity was not represented in that war. The Catholic Church does not represent the Bible; they represent the Pope. But that aside, even if we gave that one point and said, okay, you can count the Crusades against us, World War II, which is one of, I guess, probably, as far as I'm aware, I'm going to say it has the highest body count of any war in all of recorded history. World War II was fought because Hitler, a firm believer in evolution, reached the idea of eugenics and decided that if man is merely an animal, then we should promote evolution by wiping out the people who are less desirable, and therefore create a master race. In other words, the bloodiest war in human history was fought because a man who understood that way, had no value for human life, who was an evolutionist, who was an atheist, and that influenced him to decide that he had the right to kill people in numbers beyond imagination. Pretty much every genocide in history actually stems from a very similar mindset. Most of the ones that in more recent time, in fact, let me rephrase it. Pretty much every genocide in recent times stems from that kind of mindset. In the past, maybe there were different reasons. But the point being is this: you have this man who's supremely well educated, but he is so foolish that he looks at a man like Hitler and thinks that Hitler fought World War II over religion. He fought World War II over evolution, over the desire to create a master race. How foolish do you have to be to not be able to see that? And it really comes down to one thing, that in his heart, he says there is no God, and therefore everything that promotes God is evil to him. And his whole desire is to make God the bad guy. And he is going to process all information in a way that makes God look bad. Doesn't matter what it is. I mean, you could say that, a miracle happened and the whole hospital at the city was cleared out and everybody is healthy and well, but somehow he's going to process that information that, oh, there's no God, and that if there was a God, he's the bad guy in that story, because that's the heart of that person we're talking about. It's a heart of foolishness. Now, having said that, and understanding a little bit more of how these things are affected, where wisdom comes in, and I said it's layered, and hopefully we can talk more about it if I don't say everything I want to say about it tonight. But where it's layered is you see this, that when it comes to what am I trying to say? When it comes to wisdom, you don't just jump straight from, okay, God's the problem, everything's wrong, where foolishness is, to, okay, then God's the answer, everything's right. There is a layer there in the middle where you move into the realm of wisdom. You do actually start to use the information that's being given to you, and it's more of a neutral capacity, wherein you have an ability to take the information being given to you and apply it and use it well and so forth. And most of us know people like that. We have friends who, they're not atheists, they're Gnostic, or they believe there's probably a God, but they just don't know the God of the Bible yet. Or friends who, again, going back to the idea of Gnostic, are just not religious, but because they're not approaching everything with a hatred for God, they still have a capacity in their heart to at least properly apply the information given to them. Sometimes they'll miss the mark. Sometimes their worldview will be wrong because they are looking at things from a bad perspective, but at least they have the ability to look at an equation that says Hitler is believed in eugenics. Hitler killed everyone who was undesirable. That does not equal God is the bad guy. It equals that the unbelief in God and the lack of value in human life equals Hitler was a bad guy. They have the ability to at least read the equation and understand what it's saying, instead of, oh, A plus B equals C. Oh, God must be the bad guy, because that's where foolishness leads you to. This type of wisdom I'm discussing is one where sometimes you'll say A plus B equals C, then maybe it also equals D. That kind of thing where you're still off, but at least you're not completely foolish. Whereas the next step, which is the one that really where the fear of the Lord starts to overrule the heart, is where you get to that sound wisdom, that wisdom that comes from above, where the way you apply knowledge and the way you understand information is completely influenced by the belief in God. That's where you take it a step further, and there's where you get the difference between people who, if I can put it like this, people who let's say they let science be the Lord first. So they take what they know about the world around them, and then they apply that to God, instead of taking what they know about God and applying that to the world around them. And that's why you have people who, for thousands of years, debate the same thing over and over again, because they're looking at it from what they see with their eyes and all of this, and never bringing God into the equation until afterwards. Whereas many times, in fact, pretty much all the time, when somebody will let the Bible set their science first and then go look for the evidence of that in the real world, they find that. And what I mean by that, because that sounds bad when you say it that way, but what I mean is the way we discovered ocean currents is because a man reading the Bible saw that Solomon said that there's channels or roads in the ocean, and he went and did the research and found it to be true. And a lot of science that exists today that's proven factual, no question about it, science, is stuff that come from somebody who said, okay, God said this in his word. It must be true. Let me go search it out. In fact, some of the beliefs I have in science right now that I found there's science to support it, the Bible said it first. And it was something that I come to morally. I understood morally that it has to be this way because God's a holy God. And then when I looked at it, the science actually does say that to be true. These things I'm talking about, just beliefs of mine. So there's what I say. It's not just black and white that you have way over here this foolish person who in their heart says there's no God and therefore every equation is always going to equal God as bad no matter what the equation actually is. Then you have somewhere in ranges throughout the middle, not just one spot, but in shades of gray throughout the middle. You're going to have people who become more and more respectful to the fact that there's a creator. And as they do that, and I'm using this mostly in terms of creation science because it's easiest to illustrate it that way, but you're going to see people who become more and more open in these shades of gray that there is a creator. And so as you go through those shades, you'll start to see that these people have a better understanding, a better ability to process the information given to them. And they're not just always trying to impose this conclusion that God is bad, that man did something evil, so God is bad. One time one war in human history, one major conflict, that being the Crusades, you might blame it on Christians. Again, Muslims, yeah, sure. Every war they've ever fought has been in the name of bloody religion. But Christianity, if you make us accept the Catholics, then you can blame us for the Crusades. But the Catholics, again, don't represent us, they represent the Pope. You see where wisdom allows you to go from, aha, I got you, you're the bad guys, to, well, actually, Catholics don't really represent all of Christianity. And then, well, actually, this war, this war, this war, this war, and this war were all fought in the name of eugenics and evolution and atheism, and people who had a lack of value for human life, to where this idea that, the majority of wars in history were fought in the name of religion disappears in a moment with just a little bit of wisdom applied. Fool can't see that. As you step through those shades of gray, you begin to realize that it's actually the hatred for God. And, it's the exact opposite of what the fool is saying. It's not God that's the issue. It's the hatred of God and the disdain for his word and the rejection for his value of human life that has led to so much loss and death and so forth. That you hopefully see what I mean by that as you move through those shades, your whole perspective of this one question begins to change. Your whole understanding of it begins to change until eventually you reach the point where you come to that conclusion, that last step of sound wisdom, where you begin to realize that the issue is not God. The issue is evilness and sin in the heart of man. And that's why you can be wise without fully understanding that, but you can't be all the way to sound wisdom without fully understanding that, if that makes sense. So these are all things from the heart. I did want to give Proverbs 17:6 to show my point about foolishness. That foolishness is very much 17:16. That foolishness, the issue is also very much a heart issue. I think by now you can see it, but let me give you this anyways. It says, wherefore is there a price in the hand of a fool to get wisdom, seeing he hath no heart to it? So you see the issue with the fool as to why he can't understand the information he's given, why he can't apply it, why he can't make the right judgments, why he can be given the equation that this, and this happened and still read that, the reason why Hitler killed so many countless, just obscene numbers of people is because of his evil heart, and still read that as God's the bad guy. The reason why Proverbs 17:16. Sorry, somebody's asking in the comments. But the reason why someone can read that information and still lack the ability to walk away from that with the proper understanding is because the fool has no heart for understanding. He has no heart for wisdom. He completely lacks that ability. And until his heart gets right, he's never going to be able to process that information. And to be honest, this is actually an encouraging thing for those who struggle like with soul winning or witnessing to family members, and why certain family members are not able to understand when you're trying to present to them biblical things, or why you're trying to argue with them about stuff that to you just makes perfect sense, but to them they just don't seem to get it. The reason why people are that way and not able to grasp these things, it really just is going to come down to the issue of the heart. That you can get it because your heart is not overruled by, or even overrun by unbelief. Your heart at least has some capacity to respect and give reverence to God. So it's an encouraging thing there. Let me give you two more verses. That would be Proverbs 5:12 and Proverbs 8:5. Proverbs 5:12 says, and say how I hated instruction and my heart despised reproof. It's talking about a man who's fallen in temptation, fallen in sin. In the end, he's going to say how I hated instruction and my heart despised reproof. So it's showing you that the reason why he never learned, the reason why he didn't take the lesson, the reason why nobody could correct him was because his heart was the issue. His heart despised reproof. His heart didn't want to learn. Then the last one is Proverbs 8:5. It says, O ye simple, understand wisdom, and ye fools, be ye of an understanding heart. So you see the issue with the fool is that their heart lacks the ability to understand. The simple, when they're told to understand wisdom, again, we know simple is going to be the opposite of knowledgeable, somebody who doesn't know the information to know how to use it. They can't apply information because they don't have it. But the fool, the issue is his heart, that his heart doesn't understand. So there's the contrast between those two. So there's the lesson for tonight, that the heart of the issue really is the heart. We must keep our hearts with all diligence, because as we allow unbelief to take control of our heart, it is a poison that overcomes the heart. We can be some of the most educated people in the world and still lack the ability to properly understand or properly use information, either one. Whereas on the other side of that, you can, by letting the fear of the Lord take control of your heart, reach a place that you may not be the most educated person around, but at least you have the ability to understand the information that's given to you. At least you can rightly use what information you do have. And so that's why I encourage everybody to first really look at your hearts. And the beautiful thing about this is, as God says, that if any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth liberally and upbraideth not. That God, out of the Lord's mouth, gives wisdom. So the truth is, the two ways you can fix this problem in the heart. One is by working on your understanding and respect of who God is, to ask God to help you to have a greater fear for him. And then the other is to simply ask God for wisdom, because God says that he gives wisdom. Now, I would add to that to study his word, because it's out of God's mouth, out of the Lord's mouth comes wisdom. So if you want to increase in wisdom, you need to study his word. That's why we're doing studies like this one. You need to ask him. And then you also need to ask God to help you to have a greater fear for him, that your view of him would be the one that shapes your whole world, to help you see him in that way. That would be my encouragement. All right, if anybody has any questions they want to bring up real quick, I'll try to answer those real fast. If anybody has any questions, I see there were some comments about being able to hear Hannah as she was crying. Yeah, Hannah, you can hear Hannah cry from the moon, so I don't know what to do for you on that one. As I get my office more set up, maybe I'll pull a David Toller and I'll put sound blocking panels everywhere and get me a $900. No, he doesn't have I don't think he has a $900 microphone. I think it's probably around $200. But get me a real expensive sound suppressing microphone, all that good stuff. But right now, you're just going to have to bear with the imperfections. All right, and then Stefania, I have to pause for a second to read the comics. It's fairly long, but it says, he mentions on the idea that the cause of wars being the point I was making, using that. What I was doing is I was using the argument that's commonly given, that the cause of most wars is religion, and showing you that that is a statement produced from foolishness. that if you look at the information that's given to you, easily available information, that's all, you can prove that untrue just like that. And then the more you understand that, the information given to you, and the more you apply it and use it, you'll actually begin to realize quite the opposite. The cause of wars is the lack of knowledge of God. It's because people don't regard God and don't have God in their heart, and don't value human life, and therefore are willing to destroy and kill the way they have. But he was mentioning about that it's a widely used argument, and so that people who claim that without religion there would be no wars, that's really the seed of the devil. And you see that again, that unbelief is going to be the heart of all of this foolishness, this mentality that drives us to despise and hate God and view the world with those colored glasses. To view the world with the glasses that everything is God's bad. That comes from unbelief, and that foolishness is produced by that. Then Nick also says it's pretty easy to grow our belief seeing the Bible unfold each day on the news and all around us. It should be. But again, the issue here is going to come down to the heart of whether that heart is ruled by unbelief or the fear of the Lord, because somebody whose heart is ruled by unbelief is going to see all that information, what's going on around us, and they're going to look at it and process it a whole different way than what you are. That's why, just to apply directly to Nick for a second, arguing with people about vaccines and all this stuff, it's nothing wrong with doing it. If that's what you want to do, do it. But in reality, you're going to have a hard time swaying people on that, because their whole worldview and their whole perspective is from a completely different view. It's from a very humanistic, and there is no God and there is no future plan of where all this is going. And the news says you're the bad guy, so therefore you must be the bad guy because you didn't take it. That's their whole worldview right now, because their heart is ruled by that unbelief. And so when they see what you see, you notice there's a lot of people out there who don't walk away from that saying, well, something's going on here. This is really, the Bible's been talking about this. A lot of people walk away from it saying that the problem is all those Christians who don't want to get vaccinated. So you see, it's really an issue of the heart and how you can then take the information being given and apply it. And that's why I'm going to be honest, I'm going to offend people on vaccine real quick. For the most part, I've stayed out of it. I gave my belief very early on that I don't think that Christians should take and inject anything in their body that's made using stem cells of aborted babies. That's the issue, because that's a moral issue. The rest of it's going to be political and opinion, but morality is fixed and unflexible. So when we're talking about the fact that pretty much every vaccine in the world today is produced using stem cells from aborted babies, that's an issue that's not really open for debate. Again, I'm not going to come beat you over the head and fight with you about it. That's your opinion, your problem, whether you take that or not. But that's for me something. But the thing I want to say that's probably going to offend people is what I notice is almost everybody in my personal friends list on Facebook who's very quick, and I just watch the numbers drop like this of who's watching my video right now. But the people who in my personal friends list are very much like, you must take it, you have to take it. If you don't take it, you're causing the problem. All of them are also people who I see them struggle in their own personal spiritual life as well, that there's a lot of struggle with letting God be the defining factor. There's a lot of, well, the news says this, my friends say this kind of mentality. And I'll admit, on the other side, there's a lot of people who do the same thing. But the difference is I have plenty of people on the other side who feel the way they do because of their belief in God. Most of the people who I know, or actually everybody I know on my friends list that I can think of right now, who's really beating the drum of pro-vaccine, is somebody who does so out of this is what the news, this is what society, there's very little of their belief in God influencing that. And to me, that's something that I take note of, is that if I'm getting all my information from celebrities and, Neil deGrasse Tyson has an interesting thing, that kind of stuff, as I've heard people bring up on Facebook, that shows me that my information is coming from the world and not from God. That obviously something like this, you need information from outside, because this is not something that's strictly a biblical matter. but my decision and how I make my decision should be coming from the Bible. I should have scripture to quote why I believe what I do and why. And that's why for me, the real issue is not down to whether it's an experimental drug. It's not down to whether it's dangerous or not. It's really down to the fact that there is a moral issue there of the aborted, the stem cells from aborted babies. So that's a whole other issue. Probably just got my whole YouTube and Facebook and all that stuff closed down by saying that. But since I was on the subject and felt challenged to say something about it, let me go ahead and say that. All right. I don't see any questions coming in. I've seen some comments. I see one from Stefania I want to mention. I want to say hey to people who come in later, because some people who come in later left me a greeting. So I give my greetings to you as well. Specifically, I see Vernon left a greeting there on Facebook. It says, Stefania says, I think some believe in God, but just that he is evil. It really always comes down to that. They don't want to acknowledge him and confess their sin. Well, there's two sides to what you're saying. One is that people don't want to believe because if there's a God, then they're therefore accountable to God. And that's really going to be one of the major issues you'll see. The other issue, which is going to be somewhat contradictory, maybe, or at least going to sound that way to what you have said, is it's not that they believe God's evil, it's that they hate the idea of God. I don't know that I've ever met many people who believe God is evil. They hate the concept of God. They despise the idea that there's a God. And where that comes in is it circles back to this reality that if there's a God, I'm accountable to him. If there's a God, then hell's real. If there's a God, heaven's real. If there's a God, there's life after death. Those kind of things. So I think in general, that unbelief that influences somebody's heart is going to lead them to a place where they hate God. They despise God. It's not so much that they think he's evil as that they hate him. Now, you are right. There are some people who will take that to a step to where it's like, oh, he's evil. But in general, it's going to be that they just hate him. And therefore, because they hate him, he's always the bad guy. I could probably pick on Nick with this because he has certain things that he likes to call out, but I've already picked on him once by bringing the vaccine up, so I'll leave that alone. Let's see, I'm reading one more comment. He's mentioned about the digital control grid and the green pass and all that stuff. And for us, this is why I brought up the vaccine. It actually wasn't just to try to trigger anybody or get anybody upset. The reason I brought it up is because as a Christian, when we read that they're installing control grids, that you won't be able to buy or sell, you can't go places, you lose your job, this kind of stuff if you don't have this, someone with some knowledge of the Bible knows what that means. Now, even people with little knowledge know that means something. And so then they start saying, is this the mark of the beast? Is this the mark of the beast? But someone with genuine Bible knowledge, what they look at that and know is, okay, well, it's not the mark of the beast because the Antichrist hasn't been revealed. We're still here, so forth. But what that is that it is the devil and the spirit of the Antichrist, which the Bible says worketh in the world even now. It's that spirit of the Antichrist preparing things. It's like the beta test. It's the dry run. It's God. It's the devil getting things ready for when God does take us out of the world, so that, okay, now's the time. Okay, we've got one world currency ready to go. We've already been testing the system for a number of years now. We've got the mark of the beast system set up and ready to go. One world religion's already ready. We just need to shake a few more hands and we're good to go. When we, as someone who have the wisdom that comes from above, we look at that, we begin to realize that, okay, these things, we can process that information to know that these things are just the devil working his plans. And that's why we're resistant to them, is that even in times where some of the things are not necessarily, like, for example, Bitcoins and stuff like that are not inherently evil of themselves. I mean, maybe they are, but just let's pretend that, because I don't know enough about their system to say they're not inherently evil. Maybe there's someone behind the scenes who is, but barring that, the concept of this kind of currency is not inherently evil. But those kind of things are not, but many times as Christians, we're naturally resistant to a lot of that stuff because we know the system that is looking for this to use it and to promote it and to take advantage of it is an evil system. It's the spirit of the Antichrist that works in the world even now. And so, to be honest, you could apply some of this to things like the vaccine. Now, your argument of how evil some of that is going to come down to your understanding and belief of it. That's fine. I'm not going to argue those things tonight. I've given as much as I'm going to give on that. But when it comes to our understanding of things as to why Christians are more naturally going to be resistant to stuff is because we see that this is going somewhere. Someone whose heart is ruled by that unbelief and therefore leads into that foolishness that takes away their ability to process the information and realize if this is this and this is this, then this is the natural next step. As to why a Christian who can know that there is coming a one world government, a one world system, if you don't have a mark, you can't buy and sell and trade, can then look at the world that's going on around us and not see that. The reason why you have that kind of thing is really simple, is because more than they would probably ever want to admit, they don't really believe what the Bible says. When God says that there's going to be these things, because you cannot truly believe the Bible and then look at the system that's going on around us and say that, oh, no, this has nothing to do with that. This will never be implemented. That all this digital currency and all this shaking of hands and ecumenical movement and this already set up system of you have to have this, new proof that you've taken this or that, to be able to enter certain places and so forth, that, the Antichrist is not going to use any of that. He's going to create new systems from scratch. If someone can look at that and walk away from that, that is an evidence of unbelief because they don't trust God's word, since God's word says these things are coming. And therefore, it's also evidence of foolishness in terms of how they process information. So I'm going to be a little bit offensive, maybe lose a friend or two over what I'm saying. Most of them probably never made it to this point in the video anyways. So anybody who made it to this point in the video is somebody who's willing to hear me out and look at it biblically. So I'm not worried about it. So I appreciate everyone who's stuck around this far. I see one more question. I'll see if it's something I can answer very quick, and then we're going to close down because we're getting close to an hour. Normally, I try to close about 45 minutes, but Joe got me talking about stuff that I normally don't talk about on video. So is it possible long-term side effects will be one of the horse or trumpets? I don't know, because the trumpets are going to be... Is it possible? Maybe. I mean, I don't know exactly the interworking details of everything, but the reason I would say no is this: the trumpets are not released until after the Antichrist is revealed, because he's the first, not trumpets, the first seal. And even what you're talking about, it would be more related to seals anyways, I assume, as you're talking about the, war and so forth coming forth, and with plague. Or disease and so forth, but even that's not necessarily one of the seals. It's the one that people add to it, I guess. But anyways, when you come into these things and you're seeing that, and then when you get into trumpets, you see boils and stuff like that. But by that point, you're 3.5 years into all of the tribulation and everything. So the likelihood of any of that being side effects would be no. And even as far as I believe, the mark of the beast is not implemented until after the 3.5 year mark anyways as well. So, from my personal beliefs, the way I understand the book of Revelation, what he will bring about will be a whole new issue, but it will build upon a lot of what he's already earned now. The fact that he's already got people willing to just accept whatever's presented to them and so forth, that mentality that's being breeded into society, that's more so what he's going to use. It's not so much, for example, I don't believe that Bitcoin directly will be the currency of the kingdom of the Antichrist. But do I believe that the principle, the concept of a non-localized currency that's electronic like that will be? Absolutely. I don't necessarily believe that the Catholic Church will be the foundation, that all religions submit to this, but instead I believe it'll be more so a mixture, a blending of, well, you have your Messiah, you have your Messiah, you have your Messiah. We're all looking for a Messiah. This Antichrist, this guy over here, he's the Messiah. And it'll be more of a blended up religion of all of these. And the same thing with the mark of the beast. I don't believe it will be directly this, is carried over and, okay, you still have your vaccine card or your green card or whatever card. Okay, this is your mark. No, it's not like that. It's a whole new thing. And so the same thing with side effects and disease and stuff. I think it'll all be stuff that God specifically pours out during that time period. It won't be necessarily carryover of stuff that happened before. All right. Well, it seems like we had a little bit of a sidetrack there in the questions and discussion, but it was something that's fruitful, I guess. I appreciate those who stuck around for it. I appreciate you being a part of it. Evidently, somebody must have enjoyed talking about stuff to the side of things, because there's been a positive response to the video. But I do very much appreciate you being a part of it. For anyone who did come in late and doesn't know what's with the weird background and all this stuff, that it doesn't look like my normal videos, we did move houses. This is my new office, but it is in no way prepared to do videos yet. It's just, I got internet, and that's the basics. I got internet and something that looks like a desk to put my computer on, so we can do this video tonight. So I thank you for being here. Apologize for any lack of sound quality and all that kind of stuff. As I said in the beginning of the video, we just did what we had to make this work tonight. But I hope it's been a help and encouragement. I especially want to stress that point, that if you're witnessing someone trying to share the gospel with a friend or somebody, and you struggle with, why can't they get this? Why don't they understand this? I've showed it to them, and they just don't seem to get it. Then do realize it's an issue of the heart. That if you're trying to win them over simply through the logic of why you believe what you believe, and their heart is ruled by unbelief and therefore by extension foolishness, you're never going to win them over purely through logic. It's going to take supernatural force of the Holy Spirit working and convicting their heart. And so don't be discouraged by the fact that you've given it to them logically. You've presented it and argued it and showed everything, and they don't seem to understand it the way you do. Same thing when you're trying to understand spiritual concepts to less spiritual people, to people who their whole view of the world's not informed by the Bible and their belief in God, but it's informed by other things. Don't be so quickly discouraged by the fact that they don't immediately jump on board and understand things. I'm not offended by the fact that a lot of people sitting in churches struggle to understand certain spiritual concepts or don't immediately agree to certain things, because I understand that they are still growing and getting to a place where they see things completely through the lens of the Bible and ignore what the world has to say about it. So I thank you for being here. As always, let me throw up that final banner that if you enjoyed the message, leave us an amen in the comments. I do want to remind, since Sophia brought it up, for our people to be at church tomorrow night at 6 to celebrate Josiah's birthday with us. We'll be roasting hot dogs on the fire, having s'mores. We'll do a little bit of American barbecuing or grilling to an extent. We'll do something quite American for once, since it's Josiah's birthday. I wanted to do that. I've had the stuff and was waiting for a special occasion, and I thought Josiah's birthday was a pretty good time. So I encourage you to come and be a part of that with us and enjoy celebrating with us as well. Thank you again for everyone who stuck around. We actually had a good number of people watching tonight. So I appreciate everyone who was a part of this. You may not have left me a comment and let me know you were here, because a lot more people were watching than commented, but I do appreciate you being part of the study with us tonight. All right, we'll go ahead and close out, and I'll see everybody, my people, tomorrow. And hopefully a lot of you will come back on Saturday for the next episode of the Great Bible Challenge.